Good evening, all you beautiful people. Welcome to Sunday Night Sanctuary. I'm Bishop Randy Dean. My delight to be here tonight. I love bringing this to you as a service and as a point of love that's coming from my heart to all of you who join here. So many of you through the years have encouraged me just keep at it, and we are. So I think we're about 3 years into this. I love doing this, and we do it for a couple of purposes. One is to sustain something to offer to people we call spiritual refugees. I may modify that terminology some in the days to come. I don't know, but to date, it serves us well because we've been serving and loving and listening to people, my wife and I, to people who have fled the brick and mortar of the church, especially the evangelical church. The evangelical church lost its mind, especially about 7 years ago. And I held on tight as a pastor. I've been a pastor for 50 years, held on tight to my evangelical responsibility. And I could no longer hang on to that. Going into 2018, 2019. 2019, my wife and I stepped aside from the church that we were pastoring, had been there for 30 years, and we're doing this. So to that end, we offer two sustaining, stabilizing habits, holy habits. And one is the Lord's Prayer, we'll do in a moment. And then the second is communion. Communion has always been a deep and abiding love of mine. So if you'll have a cracker or some bread ready at the end and drink of your choice, wine or juice, we'll receive communion together. Whew, I've got so much to share tonight. I want to get right at it. And communion, I think, will be a great topping off of all that I have to share. You can see from the title, My Recovery Journey. Buckle up, Buttercup. Something inside of me needs to come out, and I'm going to put that in front of you tonight. All right, Lord's Prayer, a sustaining, stabilizing force in my life. I adore it. I pray with my eyes open because I like it that way. Here we go. Join me. If you know it, great. If you don't know it, let me pray it on your behalf. Okay? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Amen. Well, that, like I said, that prayer stabilizes me, holds me strong. And it's so much deeper and broader than I think most people give it credit for. But maybe that's a subject for another Sunday night sanctuary. From my title tonight, My Recovery Story. I don't know that I've told it in the kind of detail I want to give tonight, as much detail as I can give in 25 minutes or so. I can't give it all, but I'm going to give the outline, the skeleton upon which maybe in the next weeks or so, a few weeks or so, I can give you the meat to put on that skeleton. So let me start where I've started so many times with 12-step groups and in particular my Recovery Family Spiritual Program Retreat. I'm the spiritual care director of that wonderful group of folks. I'll start the way we always try to introduce ourselves, and that is this. Hi, I'm Randy. I'm a recovering codependent. I am also a recovering higher power. I learned that from somebody else. A recovering higher power. As such, I've found that my life grew insane and unmanageable by trying to fix, manage, control, and rescue everybody around me. My needy need to be needed made my life insane and unmanageable. Did you hear that? My needy need to be needed made my life insane and unmanageable. Unfortunately for me, I didn't learn that point of reference and healing for me until I was well into my ministry as a young pastor. So back up a bit. In my early days as just a baby boy, from the age of 4 until I was 14, I grew up in a petri dish of addiction, a petri dish of a family that was being just assaulted by the weird and wacky world of addiction. It was my mother, my father, my brother, and myself. I was the youngest of all of that little crew in a small apartment in North Milwaukee. Anybody from North Milwaukee know where 27th Street, West Fond du Lac Avenue, and Center Street intersect? Well, that's where I grew up from the time I was 4 till I was 14. In those 10 years, we lived in an upstairs apartment. Now that's a fancy way of saying this was a house, a wood frame house that had been subdivided into 4 units, 3 apartments and 1 storefront. Our apartment was above the storefront. That little apartment was about 500 square feet. Think in terms of a 45, 50-foot RV. Our apartment was that small. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and 1 bathroom. All 4 of us, my mom, my dad, my brother, and me, were in that petri dish of pain. My older brother, 6 years older than me, was battling some kind of mental health issue as well as an addiction. I never really learned the whole story of his life. I'll say more about that in a minute. Except I lived with it for 10 years. I lived with his story of mental health challenges and the challenge of addiction on his life. Because he and I slept in the same bed, a double bed, in that one of those 2 bedrooms in that tiny 500 square foot apartment. Now, my dad was a 300-pound Irishman who figured the best way of recovery for my brother was to beat it out of him. So my brother and my dad routinely, regularly had fist fights. I can't tell you a frequency except to say to you, as a little guy watching their physical battles, it was constant. It was always going on. And if it wasn't fist fights, it was the screaming and the yelling and the uncontrollable rage that went on between them. I never fully understood it, except I was always there to witness it with my eyes, my ears, and my little body. I remember one time a cop came up into our little apartment, one of those tough Polish cops in North Milwaukee. I don't know how he ended up in there, but he was in our apartment, and he was mad. He was tired of coming up in there to break up our fights in the wee hours of the early morning in the dark. I had stepped out of our little bedroom and was watching the goings-on with this one cop and my mom and dad and my brother. And this cop looked at me, and he looked back at my family. I was standing there in a little terry cloth bathrobe, shaking from post-traumatic stress syndrome, I know now. And I was shivering in shock. And that cop said this. He said, "Doesn't anybody here give a damn about that kid?" Well, it was in that moment something started to gel in me. Like, I exist. I am seeing this. I do hear this. Well, I wish I could tell you that it stopped then, but it didn't. It went on for a lot longer than that. with my time constraints here, let me just tell you the rest of that story. So, in the middle of all of that stuff, that misery that went on there, I was convinced that nobody gave a damn about me. That cop tried to call attention to it, and that nobody loved me. Somewhere in my early high school years, I decided that nobody loved me. So I was self-destructive. I could not. Now, we didn't have a shower. You got to understand this. Our life was pretty impoverished. We had a bathtub for all four of us. And in that bathtub, I wouldn't sit in the bathtub because I was scared of self-harming. I had been self-harming in other ways. I was scared that I would just stick my head down in the water and drown myself. And so I would stand in that bathtub to clean up. In another occasion later on, I just was running my head into the walls in the bedroom and crying and just sobbing in pain. On a lighter note, some people today would say, well, that explains a few things about you. You're ramming your head into walls might explain who you are. Okay. It's called PTSD. So later, about the time, let me see. Oh yeah, the time frame. So going forward past that petri dish in that little apartment in North Milwaukee, going into high school, I as most codependent kids will do, I was an overachiever. And I just decided I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be a preacher. Somebody had helped me along to hear my calling. That's a whole nother story as well. So I went off to Bible college, and within 2 months of being gone to Texas to a Bible college, I got a call that my dad was dying. I was almost 19, not quite. So I came home quickly because it was pretty sure that Dad was dying. He was in a hospital. And ironically, I had been asked at this church that we were going to speak on a Wednesday night. I did. While my dad's in the hospital dying, this church asked me to speak. I did. I probably did okay, but I was kind of numb. I got the word that after that service, my dad wanted me to come up to the hospital room. He wanted to talk to me. Now, remember, I'm 18, 19, about 1971, 1972. 71, yep. Nervously, after that Wednesday night service, I went up to see my dad in the hospital. And when I got there, I found out we were alone. And he motioned for me to come to his side. He was on all kinds of, early 70s medical technology. And he said, weakly, now remember, I said, this is a 300-pound brawling Irishman. But he had been reduced considerably by his physical challenge at that time. He said, Randy, I want you to know I'm proud of you. And I also want you to know I realize I've never told you that I love you. Now catch that. He said it very clearly and very directly to me. It was like a firecracker going off in my head and in my heart. Whew. I'm trying to condense all of this story. I'm sorry, I probably overreached in trying to get this into this amount of time. When I heard that at about 18, it landed on me clearly. That's right. I know that to be true. And I don't know if I told him I love you. I just stumbled out of the room and went about my life, and he recovered, and I went back down to Texas to go to my Bible college assignment that I was in, I wrestled with that moment for a very long time. I just didn't know that hadn't happened to me. And then as it sank in, I realized I've been hobbled. My life has been hobbled by that lack of direct love from this larger than life human being in my life who was, the main player in all of that abuse I talked about going on in that small Milwaukee apartment. I saw him beat my brother senseless. I saw him miss my brother in one swing of his left hook, and he hit my mom and knocked her cold. So all of that I witnessed, my mind recorded. And in all of those misadventures of life, I became a codependent, a recovering higher power, because unknown to me, I was trying to fix, manage, control, and rescue the world. I couldn't fix, manage, and control my mom and my dad, and especially my brother, who had the significant mental health challenge and the addiction that was killing him, and ultimately did kill him about 7 years ago. He intentionally OD'd. I'm still grieving that. It was an Easter Sunday morning, or Sunday, and he intentionally took his life. I should say addiction finally took his life, and my brother intentionally cooperated with it. He was 70. Well, so back to that subject of love and as how it impacted me. I discovered that love was this energy that had been significantly missing somehow from how I would experience the world around me. And it, created this codependent human who went after fixing, managing, controlling, rescuing humanity around me. But you know what was happening? I was trying to fix, manage, and control me and rescue me. Let me find a spot here. Somewhere in the 70s, 78, 79, maybe 1980, I was pastoring a church. Ginger and I were pastoring in Clyde, Texas, Trinity Community Church. And we had a couple in that church by the name of Jay and Jackie. Jay was an alcoholic, and wow, was his life a wreck. Whew, he was slowly self-destructing with alcohol, part of our church. Well, my codependent self, without knowing I was codependent, said, somebody to fix, manage, control, and rescue. Now Randy can live out his destiny by rescuing Jay and Jackie, his wife. A very long story short, I somehow wrangled a lot of money from our church, families in that church, and from our own pocket, which was pretty shallow as a young family, to get Jay into treatment multiple times. I don't even remember how many times I managed to get that poor man into treatment. Fourth or fifth time in, I was exhausted. Jay and Jackie were burning me. I was burning me up at both ends. And they were happy to have me fixing, managing, controlling, and rescuing them. But it wasn't getting anywhere. So I checked Jay into a treatment center in Abilene, Texas. I'm exhausted. My wife and children are being neglected, and our church was suffering because of my codependency. After I checked Jay into this treatment center, I was desperate. I was exhausted. Got him in his room, and I started walking the hallways of this treatment center, and I found a door that said counselor. Well, at that moment, in 1980, I think it was, I thought, gosh, I think a counselor would probably be a good idea for this little boy. I walked in there, I knocked on the door, I looked in the door, and here's a guy sitting behind his desk, and I said, hey, excuse me, I just checked in a parishioner to your treatment center. Can we chat? He grinned and said, come on in, with a heavy Texas accent. I sat down and I told him what I'd been doing with this guy, Jay, that I'd checked into his treatment center. It wasn't his, but you hear what I'm saying. He was one of the staff there. And I told him a little of my story, and he kicked back in his chair, put his feet up on the desk. I think he was wearing cowboy boots. And he said, he pointed around his office to these trophies behind him. He'd been a professional golfer at one point. And he said, I used to love to see skinny little preachers like you show up in my life so I could use you up and spit you out at your feet. He said, you see, I was an alcoholic playing golf. He said, I destroyed my life and my career. And all I needed to help me with my career of alcoholism was a dopey little preacher like you trying to rescue me. I got to tell you, stung, but he was right. And what he suggested I do was that I come in outpatient treatment to Jay's inpatient treatment. He said, I want you to come and set in on the group meetings we're going to have. He said, now I don't want you to say a word. Don't you tell anybody who you are, what you're doing there. I said, I just want you to observe. And in that treatment of about the next month, I sat and listened to the stories of people in treatment, and I realized as a codependent, I was just as sick as anybody in that room. My sickness was not alcohol. My sickness was codependency. I couldn't tell you quite as well defined as I just said it. I couldn't say it then like I say it now. But that's where my epiphany started. And I'll finish this. I'll tell more of all this story next week. I want you to hear me tell you that in 21st century America, that for every one alcoholic and addict, there are 28 family members, co-workers, friends who are Randy Dean, who are dancing around this horrible monster of addiction and alcoholism that's destroying a human being. And we're all in that dance of trying to rescue. We're all in that dance of doing what we can, or maybe avoiding, looking the other way, or pretending that we don't feel the deep feelings we feel. I want to take you back to my dad's moment of looking at me when I was 18 and saying, I love you. Unknowing to me, unwittingly on his behalf, it was the beginning, it was the genesis of me finding out who I was and finding out why my story was so important to who I would become. I'm 70 now, and this story is central to my voice. It's central to the way I think. It's central to the way I relate to the world. My recovery as a codependent is central to my preaching, to my ministry, and to who I am and all that I seek to be and do in the world going forward. If you want to hear the rest of my recovery story, part 2 will be next week. But I do want to tell you that out of that idea of my dad hitting me with a lightning bolt of 3 words, I love you. If he had hit me with a baseball bat, I would not have been more shocked. That was the beginning, a tiny genesis of me. Now, to that end, that's why anything I do, everything I do now in particular, has to do with those three most holy, powerful, and charmed words in the human language. I love you. I'll tell you more about it after we take communion, but just hang in there with me. I'm swallowing hard all through this whole thing. Keep my composure so I can get this out. In my journey over the past now, especially 4 years as I'm spiritual care director with Spiritual Program Retreat, I'm routinely in the middle of meetings and retreats where I'm watching people coming and going in our groups and in our retreats. And if there's just 10 seconds that I can find in their life of giving them this medicine, I love you. Your mind, your heart, your soul, your whole being from head to soul to toes was made for love, to be loved, and to love. So when Jesus came along on Maundy Thursday, that's the Thursday leading up to his passion and death, he told the disciples, he said, I'm going to leave you with one commandment: love. Why have we turned it into some kind of weird church shenanigans? Convincing people that they ought to sign this card, do this deed, come forward at an altar. Why did we turn it into multiple gymnastic competitions of how to be spiritual, when the truth is it was just all about communicating, living, and being? I love you. And helping people find that there is a God. There's a God that isn't waiting to do anything else in your life except to find your eyes, to make eye contact with you, and to say, my baby boy, my baby girl, I love you. Heaven or hell when you die? That's not the question. It's not the essential point of spirituality. The essential point of spirituality is one word: love. And whatever's damaged it, stole it, destroyed it, must be identified, and our life must be recovered, so that love is who we are and what we've received, and then what we eagerly, beautifully want to give. So let's receive what happened after Maundy Thursday, that mandate Thursday of Christ, when he said, they're going to know you are my students if you have love. And he took bread and he took a cup and he said, now I want you to eat this bread and I want you to drink this cup, and I want you to remember, I love you. I want you to know that this is the essence of what it's all about. I mean, forget about building a building so that you can have pews and pulpits and pianos and organs and musicians. I want you to make this your passion, your pursuit, and I want you to get over being a higher power trying to rescue people and simply be about love. So this bread was given about love. And he said, this is my body. And it's broken because of love. And it's given for you because of love. And I want you to eat this bread and remember, I love you. This is the body of Christ, broken for you, that you might be massively, majestically loved. Thank you, Jesus, for giving us the mission of love. And this is the cup. I simply want to say that when Jesus offered this cup, he knew that he was headed into the bloody mess of that weekend. And all for love, all for love, all for love. He finished the brutality of what political powers and religious nonsense imposed upon him. Political powers and religious nonsense will always impose a bloody mess. 21st century Christianity is in the middle of a political power married to religious nonsense. And it's in need of a drink to wash with love the nonsense away. This is the blood of Christ that has been shed for us to wash away the nonsense of religious brutality, higher powers who have no idea the insanity they're imposing because they're pretending to be a higher power. We thank you for this cup, Jesus. Wash away the insanity with your love. I'll continue this next week. I was probably in an overreach to think I could share all of this in a condensed point of time, but that's okay. I think it needs to be spread out over some time so it can be applied to spirituality in the 21st century. I'm convinced 12-step AA, Al-Anon, CODA, and other groups that adhere to the 12 steps. I think that much of modern American Christianity ought to do what that counselor told me back in Abilene, Texas. I want you to come to our outpatient and sit in those recovery meetings. I want you to listen to 12 steps, and I want you to shut up. I don't want you to say a word. I want you to just listen to the 12 steps of recovery. And that became, for me, a starting line. A lot of American Christianity needs to be in AA or Al-Anon or both. All right. So to the point of my life and ministry being about love, we have finally gotten our Loveware by the No BS Bishop active and ready for you to order to help support what we're doing. I hope you understand. We want to do something with this message. We don't want to just make great merchandise. We want to do something through that merchandise so that this message can get spread as far and wide as possible. Now, in my lap, I have a sample. You'll see in the comments how you can go to Loveware by the No BS Bishop and find something just like this gorgeous t-shirt that says, "It's about to get weird. I love you." Why are those 3 words so startling and awkward? Well, I'll tell you why, because we have intimacy issues. We're afraid. We've been starved of this nourishment of those 3 words. We've been starved of the nourishment we need in our recovery. All of us are in some form of recovery. And at the basis of that recovery, love has been waiting to be heard, to be filled, to impact us, like it did me when I was that 18-year-old kid trying to wrap his heart around what just happened. Now, on this merchandise, on the sleeve, you'll see here the No BS Bishop. I'm real proud of that project. The No BS Bishop, Alive to Love. It's on WPCA Radio, Amory, Wisconsin. That's become my moniker. Kind of unintended in a way, but now after 4 years, next month, it'll be 4 years we've been doing the No BS Bishop, Alive to Love. All lesser values than love are potential BS. As in bait and switch. Or whatever else you might want to assign it to. Because we're all involved in some kind of bait and switch rather than just the purity of love, which might just heal the whole stinking wide world. I know that I have a lot more to say here, but I also know I don't want to drag this out any further than necessary. I know that my life is a story, and it's still being told. And I know that my life is the result of growing up in that 500 square foot apartment in North Milwaukee, where in that petri dish of mental health challenges and addiction, that this little guy came out of there crying for love and realizing that love was going to have to be what I finally applied to me so that I could stop rescuing the world and simply be a human being giving love with simplicity. I'll tell you what you ought to do is join us here next Sunday night for Sunday Night Sanctuary. I'll fill in all the blanks. I've left plenty of them out there, so there's a lot more to be said here in my recovery story. Hey, how else should we stop doing what we're doing right now except for me to look you right in the eye? Slow these words down. Not a, "I love ya." Not that. You're not going to get that from me. What you'll get from me is, it's about to be weird. It's about to get weird. I love you. Step into the love, step out of the dark, step into your recovery, and step forward into the rest of your life. Ginger's putting up all the contact information in the comments. If you have any questions, I hope I've caused a few to rise. Feel free to email me at randydeanministries@gmail.com. Otherwise, peace. Get yourself some of this merchandise and you'll help support us. By the way, the main purpose of this is to get a podcast going out there that will be called the No BS Bishop, Alive to Love, where we can talk about subjects far and wide without any constriction of time at all. We're going to hit it hard, and we're going to interview some people who have been on the the receiving end of religion and its hatred and its bitterness and its pain. I better stop. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you joining in. Feel free to share this far and wide, anywhere you want to. I'm not shy about my story being out there. Nothing about me is hidden, right? It's getting more and more known with every passing day. I love you.